did you stumble upon this idea of rationality, and how did you get interested in this notion of decision making?
So my personal story is I was badly injured many years ago. I got burned in 70% of my body, and I spent about 3 years in hospital. And hospital is a place where you can observe lots and lots of irrational behaviors. And I got lots of my interest in from that perspective, but the thing that troubled me the most was the question of bandage removal. So imagine you were a burn patient and you were covered with burns and somebody had to take the bandages off. And now the question is, what's the ideal way to take it off? Should you rip the bandages off quickly, minimize the duration but having it very, very painful? Or should you stretch it over a long time, every second not as painful, but take a large amount of time? And just consider your own intuition. Right? How many of you would go for the quick ripping approach? How many would go for the slow approach? Okay. This is also a test of how many of you have read any of my books. And most people think that the ripping approach is better. And my nurses believed that, actually strongly. They held the belief that this was the right thing to do. And when I left the hospital, I started doing experiments in pain. So I would bring people to the lab and I would crunch their fingers a little bit. I did experiments with electrical shocks and heat and all kinds of things. And I found that it's the wrong answer. It turns out that if you take a painful experience and you make it twice as long, you don't make it twice as painful. You play with the amplitude, now you dramatically change how people experience it. So the nurses were trying to shrink the duration. In fact, they should have tried to shrink the intensity. And the question is, how could they get it wrong? Here were good, wonderful, kind people spending their life to help patients, and they were getting things wrong, and it was not that some were doing it too fast and some were doing it too slow. They were getting it wrong in a systematic way. And that started me thinking that maybe there are things in life that we feel like we have an intuition that goes in one way, but the reality is different. And because we're good people, we never want to go against our intuition. So think if you were a nurse, and if you believe that the quick ripping approach is the right approach, would you ever try the other approach? Probably not. Every day you would say, let me do the best for my patient by doing it quickly. But in fact, you might do the worst thing for your patient every day repeatedly. And nurses are not the only people in the world that get things wrong in systematic ways. It turns out it's much more general.